Nuclear utilities usually know what they paid for fuel for a reload, but they still trip up over a question that sounds simple. What did the fuel cost for this operating cycle? If you work around fuel, procurement, plant performance, finance, or executive reporting, you will already know why this gets messy and that it's still a challenge to solve. So in this video, I'll break down the two main ways to calculate fuel cost, so you can know when to use each one in the right situation. This is something that I've seen even experienced VPs at plants mix up, because it can be kind of confusing when people ask about what was the fuel cost. Because the fuel was purchased years before, and in any given cycle, some of it was loaded into the core fresh for the first time, some of it is going back in, and some of it is being discharged at the end of the cycle. And then that cost is spread out over how much electricity was actually generated while the fuel was being used. So when someone asks, what was the fuel cost for cycle 5, it really depends on who's asking and what they want to know. And the reason that it trips people up is because there's a lot of terminology that sounds very similar, and people use the same phrase to mean different things, making it seem unintuitive and leaving people feeling more frustrated than when they started. But it doesn't have to be so complicated. In fact, we can cut about 80% of the confusion by simply viewing the question from 3 different angles. What did we load? What did the cycle consume? And what exited the core? Because once we do that, it becomes much easier to see what's going on. And as an added bonus that we'll get to a bit later, it also makes it much easier to separate and see whether a change in the cost of the fuel cycle came from the fuel pricing, or the core design, or the plant performance. I'll show you using a simple tool that I built to help see this. It uses an example from an AP1000 type reactor, but what you'll see here is true and could be applied to pretty much any typical PWR or BWR. It'll help make what I'm talking about a little more visible. But the main point is how a utility should think about the number before reporting it, or comparing it, or explaining it to somebody else. The first problem is that fuel cost sounds like one number, but we know that it can take on many different forms, depending on who's asking and what they want to do with it. Let's take our example AP1000 reactor. It's been running pretty well, but we want to know what happened in cycle 8. And let's say somebody asks for the fuel cost of cycle 8. On the face of it, that may sound like a specific enough request, but the right answer will depend on the decision behind the request. Here's what I mean. We have different groups that want fuel costs for different reasons. Fuel engineering may be thinking about the fresh reload design that was optimized and loaded into the core. Procurement might be interested in the inventory and how each batch is used across its residence time in the reactor. Finance may need a number that fits into a specific reporting period. And the site VP may want to understand why fuel cost per megawatt hour changed between cycles 7 and 8. All of these are actually very reasonable and valid ways of looking at fuel cost. But it also means we can't give the same number for all of them because they're measuring different things. So how do we separate them and get to the answer somebody wants? Okay, let's start with the view that most people understand first, the reload view. This angle looks at the fuel that came into the plant for a specific reload. Here, a utility bought uranium, conversion, enrichment, fabrication, transportation, insurance, financing, and whatever other cost elements apply to getting new fuel built and delivered to the site. These costs end up attached to a fresh batch of fuel assemblies. This is the same as if you went to the gas station to fill up your car. What was the total cost of the gas you put in your tank? It's a very straightforward number, but still very useful. Procurement and budgeting teams need it because this is the front end where the actual cash is spent. And it's a useful metric because it's sensitive to all the components of the front end that I just mentioned. So if the price of uranium goes up, the utility can see that immediately in the purchase price of the final product. However, when people want to compare different operating cycles, this number can become very misleading, even if the same number of fuel assemblies are ordered and loaded. Say a plant loads 64 fresh assemblies into cycle 8. The procurement team knows the cost of those 64 assemblies. But cycle 8 isn't just made up of 64 fresh fuel assemblies. It also includes older assemblies that entered the core in previous cycles. Those assemblies are still producing energy and they still carry economic value being used during that cycle. Think of our car again. If I started with half a tank of gas that I paid $5 a gallon for, but then let's say I have an awesome friend who generously fills it up for me for free. So now I have a full tank of gas, and I drive all the way until it is empty. What was my cost for that drive? If I only look at the reload view, it costs nothing since the last fuel I put in was free, which is technically correct if the fuel has no value once it goes into the tank. But we know that's not how most people would think about it, because the existing fuel in the tank still has value. This is the same problem with using the reload cost for an operating cycle. We can't just use the purchase price of the new assemblies to give the fuel cost for an entire operating cycle, because we have to include the cost of the existing fuel that's still in the reactor as part of the mix. So we need to separate the fresh reload fuel from the fuel that actually gets used during operation. The operating cycle view is usually the better angle when the question is cost per megawatt hour for a specific cycle. This view looks at the fuel value assigned to that cycle or how much of it is consumed. In accounting terms, you'd call this amortization or depreciation, but it's simply how much of the total value of the fuel was used in a given cycle. So let's take a small step back and look at the plant. Inside the reactor core, there are fuel assemblies at different points in their lifetimes. Some are fresh, and some have been there for a few cycles already. In a lot of reactors, the fuel batches stay in for 2 or 3 cycles before they need to be replaced with a fresh batch of fuel. So a fuel assembly enters the core fresh, operates 1, 2, or 3 cycles, and then its energy is gone, so it's discharged, and a new assembly is brought in. Now, each of those batches has a cost when it was fresh, the initial purchase price. And then that value is used over 2 or 3 cycles as the fuel assembly operates in the reactor core producing energy. So we can say the value of each fuel assembly or batch should be split among 2 or 3 cycles. If we look at our car, when I got half a tank of gas for free, that didn't make the other half automatically free too. It just lowered the average cost of the full tank. If I drive until it's empty, the cost is still going to be the average of the two halves. It's the same for a nuclear reactor. We split the cost of the fuel assemblies across the cycles that they operate in. If a fuel assembly operates for 2 cycles, we'll split the cost between those 2. If it's 3, it'll be split in 3, and so on. So you might think it makes sense to divide the cost of the fuel assemblies evenly by 2 or 3 for each cycle that they operate in. But here's the thing. Unlike gasoline that produces the same amount of energy whether it was at the start of the tank or at the bottom, nuclear fuel doesn't produce energy evenly over its lifetime. When a fuel assembly is first put into the core, it produces a lot of energy. But by the second cycle, it's a bit less, and by the third cycle, it's barely putting out anything. Kind of like how a balloon deflates. When it's full, it has a lot of pressure, but by the end, there's not much left. That's why we keep adding new fuel into the core each cycle to keep the reactor running. So while we could split the cost of the fuel evenly between the cycles, in practice, this isn't very realistic. What we do instead is assign values to each of the different cycles that are proportional to the amount of energy that will be extracted from the fuel assembly that cycle. I'll explain that in a moment, but I don't want to overcomplicate it here because there are a ton of advanced ways you can do this, depending on how much accuracy and accounting the utility wants to do. But we'll just keep it basic here because this gets us 90% of the way there and saves us a whole lot of headache. Since the largest amount of energy is extracted in the first cycle, with less energy coming out each cycle later a fuel assembly operates, a simple allocation or amortization schedule might look something like this. 60% of a batch's cost goes in its first residence cycle, 30% to the second, and 10% to its third. You can argue over the exact percentages, but the basic idea is to put most of the value at the front and decrease it over time. But from this, we then know how much each batch contributes to the value of the fuel used during an operating cycle, because we can take the cost of each batch in the core multiplied by its amortization schedule. So if we had a core with 150 fuel assemblies with 3 batches of 50, with batch A costing $80 million going in for its third and final cycle, batch B costing $90 million going in for its second, and batch C costing $100 million and was freshly loaded, we can multiply batch A by 10% since it's in its third cycle, batch B by 30 since it's in its second, and batch C by 60 since it's fresh. Some simple math then gives us a total fuel cost for this cycle of $95 million, which is a different number than if we had only looked at the fresh batch C cost of $100 million. And this makes sense because the core is filled with different fuel from different batches that was bought at different prices. The thing is that by using this allocation schedule, we can more accurately determine the amount of fuel that was used in this cycle instead of just relying on the price of whatever fuel was put in last. However, the price of the fuel used during the cycle still makes it hard to compare between different cycles. because what if the cycles are of different lengths? In that case, we normalize the cost over the amount of electricity generated. So we put the operating cycle fuel cost on top and divide by the net electricity generation. So we take our $95 million cycle operating cost and divide by the amount of electricity. Let's say we ran a 1 gigawatt reactor for 18 months, or about 500 days. That's 12 million megawatt hours of electricity. So to get a normalized cycle fuel cost, take $95 million divided by 12 million megawatt hours, and we get $7.92 per megawatt hour. Which means if our fuel cycle cost goes up, then our normalized cost per megawatt hour also goes up. But you probably noticed that this is also sensitive to the amount of electricity we generate. Let's say the reactor planned to run for 500 days, but had a problem with a pump and was shut down for a week for repairs. Now the 500 days becomes 493 days instead, which means we generated less electricity. So that affects the normalized operating cost, and instead of dividing by 12 million megawatt hours, we divide by 11,832,000, which means the fuel cost goes up to $8.03 per megawatt hour. Because we loaded the same fuel that had the same cost, but used it to generate less electricity, the cost per amount of electricity increased even though we didn't change anything with the fuel. So if a plant runs well, the assigned fuel cost is spread out across more megawatt hours. And if the plant has unplanned outages, needs to reduce output, shuts down early, or has a lower capacity factor, the same assigned fuel cost is spread out over less output. The result is higher dollars per megawatt hour, even though the main driver was plant performance rather than fuel price. So yes, the upfront fuel cost of uranium enrichment and fabrication matter a lot. But the utility still needs to look at how effectively did the plant convert that planned fuel use into electricity during that cycle. So an increase in fuel cycle operating costs can be driven by the cost of the fuel itself, the way the plant operates, or a combination of the two. And this is where the super handy fuel tool I built comes in. It's made for operators who need to get a solid handle on their fuel costs, so it may look a little intimidating at first, but you don't need to feel like you need to understand all of it all at once. Here you can enter the cycle number, the cycle operating length, and how many assemblies will be loaded fresh for this cycle, and the capacity factor. You can also enter the amount of uranium and uranium enrichment for each fuel assembly, and enter the cost, or just do as I've done here and let the model auto-calculate the cost based on typical assumptions. Which we'll do that here, but you can change those later if you need to. We'll also use a standard 3-cycle amortization schedule that we talked about before. So you can see here we're loading 64 fresh assemblies and discharging 64 old ones. The tool then tracks the existing fuel that's in the core, what it cost, and what cycle it's in, along with the electricity generated to come up with a fuel cycle operating cost. So you can see exactly what the allocated cost is from the fuel for that cycle, considering both the direct costs, like uranium enrichment and fabrication, as well as the fully loaded costs with indirect things like shipping, insurance, engineering, or anything else that you'd like to separate out. We also see the amount of electricity generated that cycle, which includes the capacity factor or how well the plant ran. It also shows the first view we talked about, the fresh fuel cost, because that's still useful for certain contexts. But here's the really powerful thing this tool does. It lets you compare cycles against one another and see what's driving the differences in costs between them. So if one cycle had a good operating capacity factor, let's say 98%, and the next didn't, let's say 90%, even though everything else was basically the same, the cycle costs increased significantly. And you can see that here in the cost change from the previous cycle. There's a huge delta because of this capacity factor difference that just absolutely overwhelms everything else. The point of all this is that it's useful because it forces the right conversation. A bad cost result may point towards high procurement costs or subpar core design or towards unreliable operation. The number alone doesn't tell you which one until you can start to separate it out into its drivers, so you can more realistically see what's going on and make better decisions. Now, the last view that we haven't talked about yet is the opposite of the first one, and that's the discharge view. Instead of looking at the fresh fuel assemblies coming in, this view looks at the assemblies that are going out at the end of their lifetime. At the end of an operating cycle, some of the fuel assemblies in the core will be discharged and moved to the spent fuel pool to make room for the fresh assemblies that are coming in. But you probably noticed something. We've been saying that each batch of fuel assemblies operates in the core for 2 or 3 cycles. Most PWRs in the US load between a third and half of the core each cycle. Meaning if a core like an AP1000 has 157 total fuel assemblies, It would load between 52 and 80 fresh fuel assemblies every cycle. Which means if we loaded anything more than 52 new fuel assemblies each cycle, there won't be enough space in the core to operate all of the fuel for all 3 cycles. Some of it is going to have to be discharged after only 2. For example, if we loaded 64 fresh fuel assemblies every cycle and wanted all of them to go through all 3 cycles, that's 64 times 3, or 192. But the core only has space for 157 fuel assemblies. So we'll have to discharge some of them early before they reach that final 3rd cycle. However, we said our amortization schedule is fixed at 3 cycles. So what happens when we discharge some assemblies after only 2 instead of all 3? And how does that affect the operating cycle cost? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Once you know a fuel assembly is going to be discharged, assign its full remaining value to the cycle it's coming out of. Because once we permanently discharge a fuel assembly, its value is gone, so we have to fully assign it somewhere. And that place is usually the last cycle that it operated in. So that means in our typical 3-cycle amortization schedule, when a fuel assembly is discharged after only 2 cycles, we simply add the remaining 10% of the last cycle into the second and increase it from 30% to 40%. That way, we still have 100% of the value assigned during its lifetime, even though it operated less than it might have. Because at the beginning, when that fuel was first loaded, we might not know which fuel assemblies are going to operate for 3 cycles and which will operate for only 2. So we can keep this option to combine the last 2 cycles while not messing up the accounting everywhere else. But that does mean that since some additional amount of the fuel cost is being assigned when it's being discharged after only 2 cycles, that it increases the cycle's operating cost by a small amount. It can be a little confusing, but this approach can also create a bit of an accounting artifact that we have to go back and update the previous cycle once we finally know what fuel was discharged. But the thing is, if we already know what's going to be discharged early, then we could account for it, but that depends on how well the utility knows what the cycle looks like, how well the plant actually ends up operating, and which all could end up changing the plan. So how do we know which view to use and when? Well, that depends on who's asking and what they need the fuel cost numbers for. The reload cost view is useful for procurement and upfront cash expenses. But the cycle cost view is more useful when showing the performance of that fuel and seeing how well the plant operated compared to other cycles. So when someone asks what was the fuel cost of a cycle, you should be able to pause and find out what they're trying to understand. If they care about the cash cost of the fuel coming into the plant, then the reload view is probably the right place to start. If they care about the fuel cost of producing electricity during that cycle, use the operating cycle view. Because if one cycle looks more expensive than another, the answer may not be the fuel got more expensive. It might be that the plant generated less electricity, or that the core used a more expensive mix of fuel. Or it might be that part of a batch was discharged early, so the remaining value had to be recognized sooner than planned. If they get mixed together, you can end up sending procurement, fuel engineering, operations, or finance chasing the wrong numbers. So if you work around fuel, procurement, utility finance, or plant performance, I'll leave a link to the tool down in the description below so you can try it out for yourself. But the thing is, calculating fuel costs is not something that everyone can do. So to see how the most successful nuclear projects build organizations that have real competence, then watch this video, where I break down the exact system of how to build expert teams so you can save money in the long run.